If you are growing and becoming a full version of yourself, that is a gift to the relationship, whether it stays together or not.
And it's that level of self-consent and self-integrity that I think builds the inner foundation of self-trust that we're all looking for.
And that's magnetism.
From To Be Magnetic, this is the Expanded Podcast with your host, Lacey Phillips.
And your host, Jessica Gill.
As the leading destination for neural manifestation, we dispel the woo-woo in order to help you create real, tangible results based on neuroplasticity, psychology, epigenetics, and energetics. Our goal is to normalize the practice of manifestation and empower you to get into the driver's seat of your life in order to manifest the experiences, relationships, and things that most align with your authenticity. And by pressing play, the process begins.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Expanded. I hope you're having a beautiful week. So you are in for a real treat today. We have on Mark Groves and his incredible partner, Kylie McBeath. You guys have been requesting one with both of them for a while now, and I'm so excited to get to share this with you. As you know, Mark is a human connection specialist, founder of Create the Love, host of the Mark Groves podcast. He gets real with relationships. If you aren't sure if you're being honest with yourself or really taking accountability for your side of the street and what you bring to the dynamic, he will point you in the right direction. And Kylie is his incredible partner. She's known as Being is Beautiful on her Instagram. I have been following for years. She talks a lot about the relationship to self, sovereignty to self, spirituality, embodied liberation, what it means to heal ancestral lines. I mean, all of the things that we love here at TBM. And it's so beautiful to have them on today. They are sharing their latest book they co-wrote together, Liberated Love, Release Codependent Patterns and Create the Love You Desire. This is the guidebook that really can help set you straight in relationship dynamics. Now, if you're in a relationship, if you're single, if you're just kind of loosely dating, we all have these patterns that we picked up around our relationships from childhood. And they play out in our closest relationships, often our romantic ones. And even if we're single, it is playing out in our dating experience or the way in which we're going about the world single. And so the whole goal of their book and what we're going to talk about in this episode today is really understanding what are those codependent patterns that we are repeating in relationship that are making us disconnected from our true, authentic soul desires. Where are we seeking outside validation and acceptance? And that is blurring the lines between what our soul is really craving and how we're trying to source our self-worth through outside things. They have this incredible protocol called the Relationship 1.0, the Sacred Pause, and then Relationship 2.0. And in that sacred pause is that invitation to go inward, to kind of disconnect from the things that are separating us from ourselves. I'm going to put the invitation out to you guys. I would highly recommend reading the book. And also think about, what does a sacred pause look like for you? I know for me personally, as I enter a container of marriage with my partner, Daniel, there is so much that I want to make sure I do intentionally and enter in such a loving way. And so I'm definitely going to be taking my own version of a sacred pause. We are going to be taking our own version of a sacred pause. And we're kind of figuring out what that looks like, but mostly it's really understanding how can all the times that I, reach for outside things turn back inward again and really come to myself for those things, so that when we connect in our partnership, it is from a place of full independence, full autonomy, full interdependence, rather. Anywho, you guys are going to absolutely love this one. It is fantastic. Recommend the book. And if you guys are inspired to do your sacred pause, we have our summer challenge coming up. Our pre-week will be launching in May. So it's just enough time to read the book and perhaps enter the challenge and see that as your sacred pause to yourself to peel back any of those blocks and layers. All right, enjoy.
a word from our partners.
As someone that talks a lot for their job, and I'm not just talking about podcasting, I am on calls all day with our teams, on Zooms, on working sessions, on phone calls, constantly talking. And that really starts to wear on your throat. Sometimes at the end of the day, I feel like my throat is so fatigued. But one of the products I absolutely love using that helps me support my throat in this is the Beekeeper's Naturals Propolis Throat Spray. Now, you've probably heard my emphatic love for Beekeeper's Naturals products. They are reinventing the medicine cabinet, creating clean, effective products powered by the beehive and backed by science. Their founder, Carly, was truly looking for an alternative for so many different products out there because she wasn't able to take a lot of the medicines that we find in our typical medicine cabinet. And she wound up discovering that a lot of the ingredients that are used in the beehive are so supportive to our immune systems. They're packed with vitamins and minerals and antioxidants and B vitamins and all the things that are good and fantastic for our body, our brain, our immune, all of the things. So not only is their Propolis throat spray soothing to my throat, but because it is made with propolis, which is the defender of the hive, bees use propolis to line the walls and keep germs out of their hive. So when we use it on our scratchy throats, it helps us combat free radicals, damage to the body. It helps with good gut bacteria. It has vitamins B, C, and D, zinc, antioxidants, and 300 other plus beneficial compounds. So not only is it soothing my throat, but it's also helping my immune and my body from the inside out. I love using the throat spray, especially with the nasal spray when traveling or going to be around big crowds. When I do both at once, the nose and throat, it helps coat the lining of my mucous membranes in my nose and actually acts exactly how bees intend the propolis to act, which is lining the walls of it and catching any germs before they go in. So when I go on a flight or I'm going in a big crowd, I'll use the throat spray on my throat, I'll use the nasal plus spray on my nose, and that really helps protect me from any outside germs that I may be surrounding myself with. I especially love their nasal spray too because they not only have propolis just like the throat spray, but also oregano oil, eucalyptus and xylitol and saline. So it helps really stimulate the mucous membranes in there to catch any free radicals and germs and leaves you in the best state for fighting all of that off. And we have a special discount for you guys. If you want to test out any of the Beekeeper's Natural products or you're looking to restock again, you can use the code TBM to receive 20% off. Again, that is code TBM, all caps, for 20% off. Check out at the Beekeeper's Natural website or check the link in our show notes and then type in the code TBM on checkout to get your discount.
All right, on to the episode.
So excited to have you both on, Mark and Kylie. Mark, you've been on Expanded so many times, fan favorite. Kylie, every time Mark's on, they're like, wait, you should do an episode of both of them. I'm like, I would love to, like, can't wait. So it's such an honor to have you both here. I feel like you guys are the ultimate couple expander in so many ways in every part of your journey and how you really truly honored yourselves and taking us all along for the journey as well. So thank you guys for being here today.
Thank you for having us. You know, ironically, we reference your work, Lacey and To Be Magnetic, in the book about expanders.
Yes, I saw. Yeah. That's so exciting.
So we are honored to be here. I've always had so much fun on the pod. The last one we did together, so much fun. So excited to be able to share this conversation with my wife as well.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
So I wanted to kick off this idea of the journey that people are going to kind of come on with us, even in the podcast, is like, what is a relationship 1.0, the sacred pause, relationship 2.0? And I want the audience to also kind of think about the relationships they have with themselves that might define in these different themes and chapters, the one they have romantically, the one they have with friends, family. What does the 1.0 look like? The pause, the 2.0. Talk a little bit about the 1.0. What is going on there in that first version of a relationship?
I mean, I think 1.0s are really kind of the normality of relationship. And that's not none of what I'm saying is in any way an insult to people's relationship circumstances, because I have been in them. It's to just reference that what we're taught about relationship is, I would say, almost always not healthy relating. It's generally relationship that is built on, for especially a large group of people, an absence of an actual self, respecting and honoring our own boundaries, our own needs, our own wants, our own values. I mean, I work with people where I'm like, what do you want? And they're like, I don't know, because they've never considered that. They spend their life orienting around other people's wants and needs. So 1.0 was really that. It was that our relationship, in the way that it was, the subject that was birthing the pressure on the relationship was kids. I wanted to have kids by a certain time, and Kylie had agreed to that. I was very explicit about that in the beginning. And I would say it was about 2 years in, 2.5.
Yeah.
And she was like, hey, like that timeline doesn't really work for me. Maybe can we push it? And I was like, okay, let me feel into that. Okay, that works. It was like a push of a year or something. And then she went to move it again. And I was like, what else? So at the same time, just to give some context to people, Kylie had a dream.
I'm a big fan of dreams and prophetic dreams and dreams that shake us awake. About 6 months into our relationship, I had a dream of a burning house. And in the dream, a voice shot through and said, it's time to go. I woke up trembling, shaking, and I was like, what do you mean it's time to go? I'm in a relationship. This guy,
Just got here,
quote unquote, has it all. He's kind. He does the work, you know, all the things that you're looking for when you check the boxes. And I made a list and Mark checked the list. So when I received that message of it's time to go, I immediately was like, absolutely not. That must be trauma talking. Not truth. That's trauma. So I kind of tucked it down into the recesses of my unconscious and let it fester there for a while.
Till I said to her, hey, like, I feel like every time I get close to you, you distance. And then I get close and then you distance, and I don't want to chase you. Then she shared with me about her dream. And that was probably about 8 months, a year-ish into our relationship. And it became a subject, like this fear of her having to go. It never really resolved because there was always this unconscious, and I would say conscious part of me that's like, she could leave any day. She had this dream about leaving. She hasn't resolved why she can't fully choose this relationship. And then the shifting of the deal breaker of kids started to be the real symptom. In hindsight now, I can see with absolute clarity that when people change deal breakers, which deal breakers, for context, if you're listening and you're not familiar with the term, is something that you have to have it in relationship. Usually it's things like getting married, not having kids, not drugs, not smoking, not like things like that. And when someone shifts a deal breaker, what they're really wanting to do is shift the relationship. But they are really putting it on the other person who held that line or held that standard or expectation or whatever agreement. And when it came to shifting it again, that's where I was non-negotiable. And really what Kylie was seeing was, one, on an unconscious level, will I stand in the thing that I said I stand for? But also a way for the relationship to actually dissolve without it having to be dissolved about, I just can't choose this, which I would probably internalize and then feel sad and all the things. So it brought forward a really powerful moment. And I said to her, look, I want to create a life. I want to create a family, and I want to do it with you. But if you don't want to do it with me, that's okay. I still love you. You know, because about 15 years before that, I had been engaged and I didn't want to get married. And I had really desperately wished someone would have said that to me when I left. And I got to be on the other side of that conversation, knowing that what was appropriate for us was what was appropriate for her. So if she needed to leave, then there was no other way. And I could love her in that leaving. That's really what brought everything kind of to a real big head.
And this is what Relationship 1.0 is all about, is it pushes us to the places where we can no longer tolerate the old ways of doing things, our old normal.
Yeah.
So like Mark could no longer tolerate my ambivalence, and I could no longer tolerate my own internal split of not being able to fully choose it and thinking that there was something wrong with me. So Relationship 1.0 got to this quote unquote breaking point where it was like, we can't keep doing what we've been doing. And that's how we define and describe Relationship 1.0 in the book, is like, this is where all of our stuff comes to the surface to be worked through. All of the young attachment stuff, childhood stuff, that's
nervous system, yeah.
Our mask that we wear, that we put on since we were young to source validation, safety, and security. for me, it was like, I'm the damsel in distress. I'm broken. I need somebody to save me. Mark was like the savior and the comedian. It's like starting to peel back these layers in the safety of a relationship while cultivating the internal foundation to peel back the layers, peel back the emotional armor, and actually bring more truth and authenticity to the dynamic. And as we started to do that, more truth and authenticity, which for me was, I'm not ready to have children. And so in the light of that truth, then it was no longer a yes for Mark, because he's like, I am ready. So,
and the relationship, the way it was, couldn't hold children.
Right.
Because it's like, what a beautiful thing that a relationship requires in order to go deeper. And this is true of all relationships, romantic especially, requires that the masks bubble up, that the defense strategies, the unhealed stuff from family, the bags we got handed so we can hand them back, the bags we handed down so we can take them back. Like, what a beautiful thing that we could no longer wear our masks because we loved each other so much. And the biggest shift, I'd say, that was so powerful for me, and I think equally as powerful for Kylie, was that instead of seeing her ambivalence as a problem with her, that she couldn't choose a good guy, blah, 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 it was actually, what is wise about her intuition and her experience and her ambivalence, that this actually doesn't work. And so when we shifted in relationship 1.0 at the end, when we shifted to like, hey, you've actually known all along, and that's powerful. And maybe it's actually your brilliance, and we've been labeling it as trauma and issues and all the things. That created, a few of the founding principles of liberated love, which was honoring each other's path as our own, that what's coming up for one person is coming up for both people. And this fierce dedication to just telling the truth, like avoiding her ambivalence or avoiding her dream, it didn't serve us. Let's bring that right to the table. And the person who's in a relationship with someone who's ambivalent usually is not honoring themselves. So they're part of the pattern. They just get to be the one who says, you're the problem. And I had to let go of the finger pointing as a way of creating a hierarchy in the relationship, if that makes sense.
He's not a victim of my inability to choose because he's choosing it, right? So that's another key principle is self-responsibility.
Yeah, like I'm not a victim of her lack of capacity to choose the relationship because I'm equally choosing to be in a relationship with her. I just get to be the martyr.
Right.
It's so powerful when we can sort of name that those dynamics are going on, because like one of the biggest questions we get when people start doing the internal work or TPM work or self-help work is like, okay, now I'm starting to learn and connect to my authenticity. And I don't know if I would have chosen this partner, the version I am now. And so there's this freak out moment of like, are they a test? Do I need to break up with them immediately?
Right.
Well, maybe, but let's give the container of the relationship space to grow and step into that. Are you naming what you want? Are you clear on what you want? Like you were saying when you had certain clients and you were like, well, what do you want? And they were like, I don't know. Getting really so clear of like, what does my soul need in this moment in time? And how can I communicate that with a partner? I think when we get those whisperings, especially the intuition, when it comes through in those subtle and not so subtle ways, it's just like telling you, we push it down, it comes out backwards with the mask, or we numb it, or we avoid it, or we keep busy. There's all these things we do to not look at it when actually looking at it is the thing that's going to ultimately give us everything we want, but it's so scary to do.
So necessary. And if you're listening or watching and that's an experience you're having, if you're growing and becoming a full version of yourself, that is a gift to the relationship, whether it stays together or not. That's a principle that the soul knows to be true, that like, if you coming fully alive threatens the status of the relationship, then good, because it needs to be. I often think of how wild it is that we get out of relationship and then we do everything we love. Then we become everything we want. I do believe that heartbreak and breakups are one of the most powerful catalysts to self-reclamation and self-expansion and just becoming a self. And just by actually saying, I'm going to come fully alive and I want to do it with you, I want you to come fully alive too. If the relationship is built on the 1.0 things we're talking about, which is not having a self, not having a voice, not identifying as a problem, right? Like all these different things, then what a beautiful gift that is to the relationship to say like, through this container, why don't we actually become? That's a whole different way. Like, I remember when I was in my 20s, I wasn't like, oh, your feedback's so good. I really appreciate it. It's helping me grow and become a better person. But now, although I don't always like her feedback, liking it isn't synonymous with it being true or not.
Okay, first I want to talk about the split and the disconnect, right? How do we start to honor or notice or see where that split is happening? A lot of people aren't even conscious that that may be occurring. They don't want to look at it. They want to avoid it. So what are some things about that disconnect when we're disconnected from self and thus the relationship?
So many different ways to start to label. I agree with you. A lot of people don't realize we're split until something happens or there's an illness or a diagnosis or something shifts and they're like, wow, you wake up one day and you're like, something's off and I don't really know what it is. For me, and what we kind of bring to voice in the book is looking at your body and the symptoms your body has, like anxiety, depression, autoimmune, or just intuitive feelings of feeling off or something's not quite right. Or what else would you say in terms of like the physical symptoms or even just mental, emotional?
Well, I'd say any form of anxiety.
Yeah.
If you're showing up with anxiety, depression, you have, autoimmune, you're noticing gut issues, burnout. You're actually living the same repeated patterns, same partner choices, same dysfunctional relationships with food, body, on your devices. I would say a massive, and this is pretty prevalent, so if I say this and you're like, shit, I do that, it just be with the information, which is that anything or person that you're in relationship with, that you actually don't have control of the relationship. And I don't mean control of the person, but I mean, you're not free to choose. So with a device, can you not use Instagram? Can you not use TikTok? Can you actually say, I'm not going to, and trust that you're going to do that? Because if you don't have access, this really shows up relationally. So if I'm working with someone and they're in a relationship with, let's say, a woman in a relationship with a man, and the man is not a full yes, but she keeps engaging with that guy, maybe friends with benefits, maybe situationship, but they're still pursuing. But there's a knowing. If they don't have access to the know, because then I get asked, how do I know when a good guy comes along? You will not actually be able to choose the right fit because you don't have access to a no. So what I mean is that if you don't have access to a full no, your yes isn't real. Your yes comes with small print. So you won't trust your yes because you still don't know, you still don't have access to a no when alignment's not there, which you guys talk about the test, right? Like that's the test. The test is, can you honor what you say you want so that you can build the neural pathways, the life, the abundance, the possibility? Because what you're saying is, I trust this new unknown more than I want to stay in the pain of the familiar pattern, that I use different techniques and social scientists build apps to make sure they fuck with you. It's like the dopamine is going to hit me, but can I say no to it? And I know like a lot of your work is about like finding that deeper congruence. And that's it. Is if you want to know if you're split, just look for where you're not in congruence with what you say you want. That's instant evidence.
I know you guys have a lot of good tools in the book too, but like just a quick check-in, like how can you, actually I loved your daily questions check mark where it was like, do I enjoy my choices or do I like my choices? Do I like who I am today? You know, having that moment where you're like, if I look at every action I took, does that feel like me? Did I make it from a me-centered place or a fear-centered place or a avoiding-centered place? Who is choosing every moment of my life? I think that is so huge.
Yeah, and so much of this journey is about having that level of self-awareness. How did that interaction feel? How did that conversation feel? How did that dynamic or lunch with my friend feel? Like, it's really starting to just be aware of how we actually feel in any given moment, in any given relational dynamic. Our energy of like, wow, I just felt depleted after that. What's going on there? Or I feel really energized by that. Okay, that's a sign that something, was going right there. But so much of this journey really does feel like a coming back home to the body and getting into a right relationship with our own emotions and our own instinct and intuition. Because many of us are so focused, and I mean, myself included, so much of our consciousness is orienting around other that we don't even know what's happening in our own bodies and our own beings. And so it really, this journey from 1.0 to the sacred pause is all about coming back home to self, to rediscovering who am I underneath all of these masks and strategies that I've had to layer on in order to protect myself, which again, no shame or blame or any judgment around any of that. But this is the work that we're being asked to do at this time on the planet, is like, let's peel back these layers and let's really start to come home to our own bodies, to our own yeses. That work of self-consent of like, is this a yes or is this a no, is probably the simplest way to come back into congruence with self. Can I give myself enough time and space to even ask the question before defaulting into saying yes when I really mean no? And if maybe we don't have the clarity if it's a yes or a no, especially if we've been disconnected from our bodies and our feelings for however long we've been, can you give yourself permission to be in the maybe? Maybe let me feel into that some more. Let me get some more information and data before I commit. And it's that level of self-consent and self-integrity that I think builds the inner foundation of self-trust that we're all looking for.
And that's magnetism.
And that's,
at the end of the day, that's magnetism. It's like, who are the hottest people? They're people who have boundaries, who have a self. They're not the people who pretend to, who read pickup artistry bullshit. They're people who are like, I trust me, that when I am approached with what is not a fit, I got me. And when I got a maybe, I'm in the maybe and I'm discovering. And then when it's a yes, it's a yes. Like, how else do you create abundance or manifestation if you don't even have access to that level of self-trust and discernment? That sacred pause, that container that we're talking about, is necessary because what it's doing is it's creating a cocoon around our being, but it allows all the noise of how we've been negotiating who we are with what people want of us, what they expect. And so what occurs is like, we might have always been the butterfly, which this metaphor, let's just try to make it work. We might have always been a butterfly, but we were raised to be a caterpillar. And so what occurs in the cocoon is actually the sacred seed of that, the generative material, is building that level of like, when I make commitments, I commit. I'm going to allow myself to emerge. Most people want to leave the container early. It's almost 100% of the time people break their container or leave it early. And that's not a failure, because what we're learning is there's still a gap in our integrity. There's still a gap there's still another blind spot. And we talk about blind spots in the book. There are like these ways that we don't allow, we skillfully avoid the truth.
Yeah, and I just want to add a piece in here because I think it's really important, is that we arrive at the truth when we have the capacity to hold the truth. And so much of our work in this book is actually creating the internal and external resources we need to build the capacity of our own nervous system to be with the full range of human emotion, but also to be with big changes and shifts that happen in our lives. For instance, in Relationship 1.0, I was sourcing a lot of safety and security through Mark via his financial stability, because I lacked the self-competence that I could stand on my own 2 feet financially. It had never been modeled in my lineage. And also I didn't trust myself with that level of power and agency. And that's a really interesting thing to hold internally, because my identity is, I knew how to relate to the world as a small, powerless girl, really. And I felt really safe in that. And there's some grief around like, wow, I felt really comfortable in that cage. But as I started to garner the internal foundation of financial security and independence outside of my relationship with Mark, for me, it wasn't just dealing with my own death of that identity of being the powerless little girl. It was also dealing with the intergenerational survival instructions that had been encoded in my nervous system, which was stay small, stay quiet, stay subservient, stay as small as you possibly can, because that is what is going to keep you safe on the planet at this time, based off of what my lineage has experienced. So this work is like so multi-layered and dimensional in that it's like, yes, we resource, but as we're resourcing, for me, that financial security and independence, I'm having to do the intergenerational work to like heal and be like, actually, we are safe now. It's safe for us to have more agency. It's safe for us to take up more space. It's safe for us to have more, I'm cautious to use the word power, but it does feel like power to choose. It feels like choice.
I mean, it's serious power.
And it's choice, because like, right. I'm no longer stuck if I'm able to resource myself in that way. Like I no longer have to stay somewhere where it's a no.
And that's what liberated love is this deep reverence for each other's path, which is not to say, at all costs, let everyone deviate. It's saying when we recognize that Kylie's or our partner's life is theirs and their path is theirs, and my path is mine, because having reverence for hers is having reverence for mine. And if she is ever called away for whatever reason, I have to honor that because it's the truth. But it's like by recognizing the power of the choice, because she is a sovereign being who's making a choice to be in this relationship, because that's powerful. Out of all the people in the world she could choose to be with, she chooses me. That's a reality. She could choose to leave tomorrow. So if I can just be with that truth, that reality, then I can honor how sacred that is. Like to walk alongside each other in this path. Like, how could we not treat that as sacred? How could we not take the frictions of it, which of course are these fluctuations of the path, and also not be imprisoned by the need for it to last forever? Because the need is different than the desire and the intention. The need means if I lose this person, there's something I don't want to confront below it, which is my fear of being alone, which is my fear, which are all very real, because as Kai's saying, the survival instructions that say play small and depend on other people, I mean, that's a need for control through playing small. But it's like that comes from a very real place. So, you know, in the book, we talk about the blueprint, like what shapes you, what brings it forward, why do you do what you do? Because it's so important to get context, because context births compassion. I mean, I hear people say all the time, like, I can't believe I do that. And my response is always, how could you not? That's exactly what you needed to do. Like, of course you're defensive. Of course you get angry. Of course you're avoidant. Of course you're anxious. Of course your nervous system's dysregulated. Those are all the exact appropriate responses, but they're not going to be productive moving forward. But we need to confront them and heal them in a way that's loving, not rejecting, because if you reject it, you can't heal it.
And that's sort of like the codependency dance that takes place. And I think one thing that really stuck out, and I know people have talked about this a lot over this year, but the difference between having true empathy and having that codependence. And, you know, oh, I can feel all the energy in the room, or I can really tell what someone's going through emotionally. But is that tapping into their energy and feeling the energy of the room based off of your fear that you have to be hypervigilant to it all? Or is it from a place of like, I'm sovereign in my own energy and I'm choosing to have empathy because this person in this conversation requires it, or it's invited in, versus a meshing with every single person around you and doing the codependence people pleasing dance as well?
Yeah, that's a big one. The discernment between those two. And we can feel that shift in our bodies when it's coming from fear of like, I'm orienting my consciousness around that other person and meshing with their energy field to try to figure out what their next move is or what they're feeling so that I can make them okay so that I'm okay. Right? That's that codependent narrative of like, if they're okay, I'm okay. Yeah. But what you're saying and speaking into is the liberated love aspect is like, I'm okay because I'm okay. Whether they're okay or not.
I can still feel their feelings.
I can still feel it, not take it on, not be responsible for it, but witness them and hold them. And that's actually true empathy. It's like, I'm not needing to change you, fix you, for you to be okay so that I'm okay. But instead, I'm actually just allowing you to be what you are, in what you are.
Yeah, and empowered empathy and codependency are the same till they're not. And what I mean by that is that the delineation, as you're both saying, which is so beautiful, is that it becomes delineated when the hypervigilance, which means you're building a superpower, you are building a superpower. All survival strategies, all masks that we wear, they're all superpowers, but they don't become superpowers until we are in charge of how we use them. Hypervigilance and codependency is so important because we needed to learn it to survive. I would argue that everybody in caretaking, providing roles, coaches, therapists, dietitians, nurses, doctors, name it, is doing that because they have a natural predilection for it. They're good at it. And it's not turned into a superpower until it changes from a fear-based thing to an empower-based thing. Yeah. That's the work, right? Not to shame it, the hypervigilance, but to be like, oh, this is what makes me really good at sales. This is what makes me really good as a coach.
I mean, that's so huge. I even think, the entire even wellness world, it's like the both and of it, where there could be a natural interest for that world and that self-development. And where did you have to play the fixer growing up? Where did you have to take care of people growing up? Where did you have to do that? And if that story isn't looked at, held, examined, questioned every time that pattern comes up, then you get this kind of muddied result in what you're going forth as. But if you can kind of own that story, then it's like, I'm doing this purely because I love this work. You know, I'm not doing it because I think I'm going to fix my mom. You know, like it's that sort of clarity.
And what you're saying is so beautiful, because if you think about this on like a 5D, 7D level, if my desire is to help people because I experienced that skill set as a kid because I had to help people, then even the clients who come to see me or are drawn to my work are likely people who need to be helped, who identify as a problem. So the only way my work can liberate them is by my work having the energetic imprint, and it can be spoken to, that they're not broken, but they actually are whole, complete humans who just have some outside explicit behaviors that need to shift that are productive for them. Because that's how really good interventionalists can work with people quickly. They don't need them as a client. Their actually idea is, you don't need me. Like, we just put a couple pieces together and boom, you're gone. And I think we orient to a lot of personal growth work, at first from heartbreaks, from letdowns, which of course makes sense. But the internalized identity is usually something's wrong with me. Eventually, personal growth work actually has to come from a place of desired expansion, not completion or fixing.
You have the power.
Yeah.
The healing is within you. You don't come broken. You actually come with really powerful coping mechanisms that aren't working for you anymore. And I think it's also the most healing thing to continue to reinforce that, because that is how people are really going to heal, when they realize it's their own autonomy, their own intuition, their own body, like checking in. I love that you guys had even tapping into each of the chakra systems and seeing how you felt in your body in each of those pieces. That relationship to self has to be sacred as well.
It's the foundation for everything. That's congruence. And if you're in congruence with yourself, then you can be congruent in the world and in your relationships. I remember one of our psychotherapists in Relationship 1.0, he said to me, he said, you cannot tolerate abuse in this relationship over here and create a loving, deeply fulfilling, deeply safe relationship with Mark. It cannot coexist in that way. You have to say no to all dysfunction, all abuse in every single area of your life if you want to step into this next level of love. And I remember being like, I guess that makes sense, because if I'm tolerating it over here, then I'm not actually standing up for myself. I'm not actually feeling an embodied sense of safety. So how am I going to open with him if I'm tolerating this over in this corner? And so it really was a light bulb moment. I have to get in integrity with not tolerating any of this in any area of my life if I'm to feel safe and to open into new layers and different dimensions of love.
Again, that's that compartmentalizing of not being liberated. It's like, I'm not all of me there. Well, if you turn yourself down to 60% there, you'll never have access to 100 here, because there's no shortcuts. There's no... Compartmentalization is bullshit, just like work-life balance is bullshit. There's just life, and everything you put in it. Is it giving you life or taking it? It's a binary system, and it's like this, as she's saying that, I reflect so much on what has come really true for me recently, and by the time this is out, it'll be public, so it's great, is that through the love that I've discovered with Kylie, I met Kylie on Instagram. My work really grew on Instagram and my podcast, but through the work of being liberated through love with her, I now look at my relationship with Instagram and I'm like, I can't be in a relationship with this platform anymore. For me, it's like I'm in an abusive dynamic with this platform, and I can't, in good conscience, be in deep love and reverence and liberated with my wife and then tolerate this other platform that just extracts from me and uses me as a conduit to extract people's attention. So I am deleting my Instagram.
Wow, so powerful. You're going to spark a movement now.
It's June 1st. I'm going to be deleting it on stage while I'm doing a keynote. I have no idea what's on the other side of it, but I have all this energy that's going into maintaining something that doesn't have reverence for me, which means I don't have reverence for myself. And that's what's possible when you experience that level of potency of mutual positive regard for one another is that now I can't be in relationship. I know it sounds weird because it's technology, but the way the algorithm works does not have positive regard for people. It's exploitive and extractive. Yeah, it's the big delete happening on June 1st.
Wow.
I have a couple other friends signing up on it.
Wow. Very, very exciting. Well, if you think about that as a metaphor for any other dynamic you have in your relationships, right? If you have those places where you're not your full whole self, your other parts are watching. They're looking for you to be the leader, to be someone to trust. That's how you build self-trust with yourself, is like those continued steps of integrity, even when they're hard, even when they're unknown, even when it's scary, because it's like now you're the adult. You get to take care of you. No one's coming to save you. Your parents not coming to say like, hey, get off your phone, Mark. That's not a good idea.
Right.
You know, you have to be that parent. And it's like, how would you parent yourself interacting with it if this dynamic feels negative? And that's like the most loving thing, is coming up and stepping up in that space.
Well, I'm pumped for it. It feels like a whole new chapter.
It is a whole new chapter. And I love what Jessica said in terms of like being the adult in the room, taking responsibility and saying, you know what, I'm going to take the wheel back and I'm choosing this. Like when you wake up to that level of self-accountability, I mean, stuff really starts to shift because you're like, wow, I'm the one that's in control. I'm the one that's choosing this. Okay, well, if I'm the one that's choosing this, that means I can shift it, which is great.
That's
because then you're back in the driver's seat of your own life instead of thinking you're not.
You know, self-responsibility has a sense of heaviness to it. If I'm going to take responsibility for my life, like, ooh, I don't want to do that. But the only thing that's heavy about self-responsibility is the feeling of guilt and shame that we have, and sadness that we didn't do it until the moment we choose it. That's actually the only feeling, is you have to then transcend all the pain of all the moments you chose to be part of, that now you don't have to be. Well, if you don't have to be, then why did you, right? That's where the patterning and context really comes in, is like, what were you taught to tolerate? What were you taught to be? And so if you can take full accountability and full responsibility, there is a grief. We talk about grief in the book. It's going to move through you, but it's actually so potent. It's so beautiful. It's actually the energy and the emotion you need to change. It's what allows the cocoon to solidify so that you can emerge as something different, who you actually are, which is the irony of all of it.
How have you been honoring your pings lately? I've been trying to take a really dedicated look and listen to what my pings are saying and to follow them. And so many of my pings relate to how I'm caring for my body. One of the ways I've been doing that is with Osea's incredible products. So before I jump into the bath or shower, I like to use their plant-based body brush to help stimulate my lymphatic system, get everything moving, circulating the blood. And then once I'm rinsing off, I love their Undaria Cleansing Body Polish. It is one of the only microbiome-friendly body exfoliators I have found out there, and it's rich in their Undaria seaweed, which has amino acids, antioxidants, nutrients to remineralize the skin. It is incredible. And then when I get out, I top it off with my absolute favorite product, their Undaria Algae Body Oil. This stuff is no joke. It is literally the creme de la creme when it comes to body oils. Partially because it has that Undaria seaweed in it. It keeps the skin's moisture barrier stronger. It keeps skin looking healthier, more supple. It really, really helps with elasticity in the skin. And it's one of those products that when you put on, it's not greasy. It doesn't sort of like linger and stick to everything. It actually deeply nourishes the skin. Can't recommend it enough. And right now, over Mother's Day, they have all three of these wonderful products in a package for the Golden Glow body set. So if you're needing to get yourself a little treat or get any mothers out there in your life, you can grab that for them. And you can get 10% off any of your Osea purchases with our code TBM10. That is TBM10, all caps, one word. Put it in checkout to get 10% off. You could also check out the link in the show notes. Go to osea.com to check out all of their incredible products and get a discount from us. talk a little bit about the sacred pause and the self-consent and also the relational consent. Because I can think of people in the audience right now are starting to piece together like, okay, I think I need this. I think we're repeating the same dynamics. We're up against the same arguments. We have masks on. We're not overcoming this thing together, or we landed in a place that we didn't intend on. I'm not making choices from my true self. But now what? Do I need to break up with the partner? What does the pause look like? Is it a breakup? Can we do it while we're in relationship? So what are different ways that people can hold this sacred pause chapter?
It's a big chapter, and it's a big question to, especially if you're in a relationship and you're navigating what you just brought forward in terms of hitting the same thing, maybe waking up to the fact that we were both wearing masks and playing out old dynamics. So the sacred pause is an intentional time period where you both sit down and say, hey, for the next 3 to X amount of months, let's do this work together. Let's bring a magnifying glass of curiosity, compassion, and grace into our relationship and see how we've been showing up and see how our early childhood imprints are impacting us from moving forward, from moving past this conflict or moving past this cycle that we've been in. Because such a huge beginning step is like, this isn't working for us. This is a no. In the way that it's headed and the way it's directed, like, you're not happy, I'm not happy, we're not moving forward into more love and more connection. So let's hit the pause button on this. And this can look like many different things. This could like reading a book together and doing the work together in those ways, like going through each chapter. This can look like hiring a therapist, especially if you're in a relationship, to be like, hey, let's look at some of our stuff together so that we can move past this conflict. And sometimes you've tried all of the things with all of the different people and practitioners, and it might be time to explore intentional separation of like, for 3 months, we're going to separate. And that can look a myriad of different ways. It can be an intentional separation, or it can be like a breakup. If we're at that point in the relationship where it's like both people aren't in agreement of moving forward, then maybe the breakup is the best, most loving option for you both at that time. And then you would enter into a sacred pause as somebody who's single to heal and work through these patterns and dynamics.
You know, it's each person will, I think, be intuitively drawn to what that might look like. The one caveat I'll add, if you're in a relationship and you're really doing what you're saying, which is like same patterns, same da-da-da, then we know that there's a deeper thing going on. Because when we build the skill sets, we're able to use conflict as a way to deepen intimacy and understanding, and actually deepen commitment and deepen trust. So the first thing you have to do is say that our intention of this pause is not to end the relationship or commit to staying together. It's to actually be in service of what is true for both of us. Because if we're trying to orient to either one of those outcomes, which it might be very true at the beginning of a pause that you want to leave. It might be very true at the beginning of the pause you want to stay. But it's actually being with those truths and being able to bring them forward that the relationship ends up being liberated. Because so many of the times, like, people, they haven't brought that truth forward till it's like the end, you know? And women initiate divorce far more than men. And it usually takes about 2 years from the time that there's a complaint or something's brought forward that they actually leave. But by the time they leave, they're generally done. So there's not actually any chance to repair. But I would say most couples, especially if they're no longer having intimacy, there's a lot of friction, there is an opportunity to break through to a whole other level. And what we don't face, we repeat. And sometimes there's so much contempt or like pain in a relationship that it is easier to confront these patterns with someone else. And that's just a truth. I don't want to, sometimes I'm like resistant to say things like that because people are like, work through everything. And it's like, no, like sometimes that's our wound, is that we stay through everything, you know? And I see that time and time again when you talk about staying or fighting for something, the people who always fight and stay too long and believe there's something wrong with them. They're just like, if I just do more, they'll change. Actually, do less. You need to do less. That's your job, is to chill and let them show up. Because if you take up space from people moving towards you, they can't step towards you. So part of the growth of a chaser is to stop. And really, I would say the dance between two people is always about space, not about each other. One person relates to space when there's too much of it, they cling. And the other one, when there's not enough of it, they run. And so it's really when we can start thinking about how our nervous system feels in relationship to space that's how we start to heal too, is building trust in relationship to showing up for one another.
How did you guys navigate the sacred pause? Because you guys had an intentional ending. It was really interesting, Kai, like listening to what you were navigating in that space of like, okay, I have this impulse to want to connect. I don't want to lose him forever. All of those moments of, oh shit, did I make the right choice? How should I do this? How should I do that? Because I think that's the first thing that's going to hit everyone is that, oh my gosh, wait, hold on, let's roll this back. Maybe it doesn't have to be so extreme, even though it's not. How did you guys navigate that pause?
Yeah, well, I entered into an intentional container for 3 months where it was no dating, no seeking, no sexting, and no stalking, no reaching out to Mark, no conversation or communication with men. And the reason I did that is because I had that conversation with Mark Wolin, the author of It Didn't Start With You. And he was like, listen, Kai, based off of your patterning, if you don't do this work and heal at the core level of your nervous system, I will be having this same conversation with you in 2 years.
Wow.
And that is my biggest fear, Jessica. I do not want to be in the same place. I am like here for liberation and growth. I'm like, if you're going to tell me that I'm going to be in the same place in 2 years, I'm going to do whatever you want me to do to not be in the same place in 2 years. So I took it very seriously where I was like, okay, I better enter into this intentional healing dynamic and really explore my relationship to the masculine and to men specifically, because even underneath my conscious awareness, I didn't realize how much of my energy was orienting towards men. And how much I was sourcing validation, safety, security, worth, my identity from them, from even like the male gaze. I mean, I talk about it in the book, but there was like a funny moment during the container where I realized I was going to a certain spin class to get the attention of the male instructor.
You thirst trapper, you.
Like, and it was like one of those moments where I was like, oh my gosh, this is so deep. Who am I without the male gaze? Who am I without, it was just like, it was a trip. And then not to mention like my deep fear of being alone, of being in aloneness with myself. I had never explored that level of aloneness before. So it kicked up a lot of fears for me, which we talk about in the book, and how I navigated that. Well, I was in a container which was guided. So I did have a mentor who was supporting me through that 3-month journey so that I could actually reach out and share what I was going through. And then I also made an agreement with my girlfriend at the time, where I was like, every single time I get activated in my nervous system and I want to reach out to Mark, can I reach out to you instead? Can I like redirect that energy into another place that is more supportive for me in my healing journey? And we came to an agreement where we would just say SOS in the text message. And I used it quite a few times at the very beginning because my nervous system was just really dysregulated by the whole container of removing men and the masculine from my life in those intentional ways. And then, yeah, that fear that one day popped up while I was in the container, and I actually broke my own container. That's how strong the fear was. I'm going to lose him forever, so I better reach out. And that one really shook me to my core. That's when I realized, like, wow, this is the deepest work I've ever done, because I can't believe I would break my own word, because I was feeling so good. I was starting to feel so empowered in my body. I could start to feel my toes touching the earth again in a new way. Whereas before I felt like I was kind of frozen from the shoulders up and I didn't have access to my body. But through that container of doing that work, I started to feel my whole body again. And I was like, wow, I feel alive. All of my energy is back in the container of me instead of orienting around everybody else. And so, yeah, to kind of come full circle on that, I broke my own agreements, and it was the rupture I myself needed, and Mark and I needed again, to double down even deeper into my commitment for healing. Because I re-entered it back into my container after that rupture, because I needed to be so devoted. Like, again, Mark said, like, usually after 2 months, we break it. Sure as shit, I broke my own because I was so afraid to keep going, to keep trusting. And what's on the other side of that completion is a level of embodied power that you've never known. Like, I've never known. Like, it was so scary. But it was like, I came out the other side of that container so fierce in my knowing, so fierce in my standards, so fierce in everything that I desired in life. And I was no longer going to tolerate anything less than that.
Yeah, it was kind of like we met in that mutual ferocity, because when we broke up, I was done. I was like, nope. I was so done with ambivalence. I was done, like, any hint of her ambivalence, I'm like, out, not interested. This pattern is done for me. I have completed it. I've chosen myself. I've walked away from a relationship with grace, love, all the things. But I was walking forward very clear that what I was creating was what I was creating. Because I trusted myself so much that I left someone I loved so much who could not fully choose it, that moving forward, I was like, I had no doubt I would meet someone and create a life. There was no not knowing, because all I know I needed was someone who had a mutual sense of curiosity, responsibility, orientation to growth, and similar values.
We were no longer sourcing safety, security, identity, validation from one another. That's the kicker. We were self-sourcing that through our relationship with healthy community, brotherhood, sisterhood, through the earth, through the elemental beings, through spirit, soul, you name it. It was no longer being sourced through one another. And since it was being self-sourced, there was now a level of agency and coherence and congruence that, really allowed the birth of a new relational template to form. Because without that level, I don't know if it's possible.
I agree with you there 100%. I think it's also really powerful that you shared about breaking the container and the rupture, because I think part of what might scare people in attempting the container is that they don't yet have that self-trust that they can withhold it that whole time. And so knowing that, like, look, go into it, do the best you possibly can. If there's a rupture, you will figure out how to get through it too. It doesn't have to be perfect. You didn't fail. You learned a new lesson. You took a new layer of going deep too. Cause I think that is something that where people are like, there's no way I could do that for 3 months. And it's like, okay, well, let's just take it day by day and see how you react each step of the way. Everything that we attach, where we're plugged into every single energy outside of us, it's peeling that back intentionally by literally not choosing to engage with it. And it's almost like it gets harder and harder the longer you go. But if you can just keep going to that threshold moment, your life is completely changed.
Right?
Nailed it.
I was working with a client recently who was like, listen, I know I need to do 3 months. She's like, I can do a month. And I was like, look at you negotiating with even what you think is possible. Like, you already know on some level you want to be able to let yourself down. You like want to be able to build this capacity, but you're thinking like 1 month is all I can do. She's now completed 3 months.
Wow.
But yeah, it was powerful. And everything, of course, comes up in that time, as you're saying. The other thing is that if you do break your agreement, one thing to go in with a deep commitment, I'm going to make it, and then break your agreement, versus like you're giving yourself the gray, right? So the same level of boundary and discipline a parent would offer a child so the child knows they're safe is the same level we have to offer ourselves. Actually, this container is created for us, for our safety, for our growth. And so if you do happen to break your container, that there is a deep commitment to learning what you just learned from it and then going right back in. There's a theory of change, I forget what it's called, but it's a spiral. So it's like when looking at people who have addiction issues and they relapse, instead of thinking you're starting all over, it actually is a spiral. So every time you make a mistake or do something, you're actually growing and changing and going up the ladder or up the spiral rather than starting again. You're not starting again. You built just new knowledge, but the important thing is that that pain of whatever happened becomes integrated, and then you've now learned from it.
Okay, now I have to commit to 3 months. I was like, I had the same thought in my head too. I was like, I could do a month. That could work. And now I'm like, oh shit, now I need to really look at that.
Well, you could do it for a month with a check-in on like, do we want to continue this? What are we learning from it? It's up to you and your fiance to determine what is highest and best for you. It can be a month for people. So I'm not saying that's the standard rule. I will say that generally, somatically, there's something magical that happens on the nervous system level when you surpass a month. And because 4 weeks is nothing, 8 weeks, not really much either. People have been wasting years dating the wrong people. And all of a sudden you're like 3 months and they're like, oh, I might miss the one. I'm like, you've been chasing that dream for 10 years.
Yeah.
Imagine if you just commit to this 3 months. For a single person, it's so transformative. And I think for a couple, it allows them to reset and create agreements. You know, Stan Tatkin's work, he's a very famous psychotherapist. He talks about how the reason that couples end or quote unquote fail is because they fail to make good agreements at the start, clear agreements. And that's what containers are, is they're agreements.
By now, you're starting to get the feel for TBM. Maybe you've heard about our workshops and you're interested in manifestation, but you just don't have the time or energy to sit down and do self-help work. We totally get it. In fact, that's why we created the Daily Practice, which is our massive library of self-hypnosis tracks that you can do anytime without having to jump into a workshop. We call these tracks our Deep Imaginings, or DIs. DIs are different than normal meditations because we designed them using a combination of self-hypnosis techniques, deep theta waves, EMDR-informed tools, and somatic experiencing. A fully loaded formula that is scientifically proven to help you clear your blocks and triggers on a subconscious level, giving you the power to actually create new neural pathways in your brain. So if your boss pisses you off, use our Trigger DI. If you want to feel magnetic before a party or an important meeting, use the Magnetic Self DI. If you're feeling anxious or down on yourself or you need help making a decision, we've got a DI for all of these scenarios and more. You can get full access to the Daily Practice inside the Pathway membership, where you'll also get unlimited access to every workshop, tool, and offering from TBM. The tools in the Pathway membership will support you year-round, whether you're in the worst, a rock bottom, or second worst, a rut, or feeling good and you want to keep the magnetism going. In the Pathway, you'll effectively learn how to become your own manifestation coach, all for less than $1 a day. So even if you're not ready to start a workshop, join the Pathway and start rewriting your neural pathways now to create magnetism. Work through your triggers and get closer to your authentic magnetic self in order to manifest. Use our special code MAGNETIC, all caps, MAGNETIC, to receive $20 off your first TBM purchase. Again, that's all caps, MAGNETIC. Now back to the episode.
So how did you guys know that it was time to enter into relationship 2.0?
I had completed my container and I had felt like for the first time in my life clear and solid in my own being. And it just like dropped in. It was like, you know what? I really think there's more here for us. For me, a lot of my life is guided by spirit and soul. So I listen to whenever I'm being guided. And I was like, you know what? I think there's more for Mark and I want to explore it. And so I reached out to him and said, hey, do you want to explore this together? And he was like, yeah, let's talk about it. And so we didn't just jump back into relationship 2.0. We created, because we're obsessed with containers, if you can't tell by now, we created a dating container. So it was a 3-month dating container where we lived into the questions, what is the best, highest, most loving form of our relationship? Is it friendship? Is it business? Or is it romantic? Or is it to separate and just like let each other walk our own paths? And so we lived into those questions for 3 months with a few other agreements in place where we were exclusively seeing just each other. I was not financially sourcing anything for Mark, so he wasn't paying for anything. That was a big hook in our previous relational dynamic. So we're like aware of that. Let's not fall into that trap again. No penetrative sex because hormones are real and sex can complicate or muddy things. And actually, one of the ways that a lot of us deal with our dysregulated nervous systems is through sex. We soothe our nervous system through sex. And it's like, no, actually, you should be having the hard conversations you need to be having in order to create internal safety so that you can go deeper in sex. But I digress. That's a part of the book. So we removed that. And yeah, we just made a commitment to like continually telling each other the truth throughout that whole 3-month container, because there were moments in time where it was a no for Mark or it was a yes for Mark. And we constantly explored what was actually coming up for us both in that container so that we could arrive at a full body yes for both of us. And there was a lot of material for us to work through. Like Mark, obviously, based off of relationship 1.0, didn't trust my word because I was like, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. But then I am going somewhere. So it was like, he's like, I don't trust you. And I was like, that's fair. So we worked through a lot of the trust ruptures that were present in relationship 1.0. And yeah, worked on, I would say, honoring each other's nervous systems and increasing our own capacity to be with the expanded nervous system, really, because I think we both had more capacity when we joined back together in 2.0. So it was like really stretching us both to be seen, to be heard, to be held in these really deep ways that we have never experienced before.
And like constantly checking in, is this a yes right now? Is it not? But honoring that the container was 3 months, the agreement was, but like what was making it a no?
Yeah.
And so we were able to bring forward the things that were causing each of us hesitancy that we could then confront. Part of that was the lack of trust. It was like, oh, you know what? I don't trust you. And the way that was received was exactly how I needed it to be received. So instead of me avoiding it or like having anxiety, I was able to bring that forward. And then you don't have anxiety because, you know, anxiety is ultimately something that shows up when you don't have access to your full self-expression and you're not discerning and in charge and empowered in the direction of your life. And so Kylie and I had constant check-ins. How's this feeling? And that created a real sense of safety because like one of the main agreements was a fierce dedication to truth. And if we can just honor the truth and not be attached to, do we have to be together at the end of this, then will the natural byproduct of truth, which led us to ending, will it be in service of the relationship deepening? And it was. So I think that's true for most people.
So powerful. The work you guys are doing together and putting out into the world is so needed. It really is a guiding light in this world in this time. How can people connect with you, find the book? Mark, if you're off Instagram, where can people find you? Like, give us the other spots they can connect.
Oh my gosh, that's the first time I've been asked that. You can find me on my website, markgroves.com. You can also find my podcast, the Mark Groves Podcast, which Lacey's been on, I think, 3 times now. And you can find our book at anywhere books are sold. The audiobook we did has conversations between us after each chapter, discussing them.
Cool.
Yeah, it's fun. It was really fun to record. And then if you buy the book, you can go to createthelove.com/liberatedlove. And there, if you can have links to where to buy it, but you can also enter your order number and you can get a free meditation we created with a workbook. And you can find Kylie until further notice, perhaps, on Instagram.
Being is beautiful. Yeah. Thanks so much, Jessica, for having us.
Yeah.
Thank you. Guys, get the book. I have so many highlighted sections. It's really, really good. Really good. Highly recommend.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jessica. Appreciate you.
I hope you all enjoyed that episode as much as we did. And if you're starting to get a feel for this to be magnetic manifestation process, but aren't completely sold yet, let me point you to some of our free offerings. You can check out the expanded podcast episode called How to Manifest Anything You Desire, where Lacey, the founder, and I break down exactly what this process is all about. You can check out The Motivation, which is our testimonial library with thousands of testimonials of people who have manifested wild things using this process. Or you could check out our free quiz to find out what manifestation phase you were in, the rut, the rock bottom, the next level, or the magic dark, and how you can navigate. Enjoy! We'll see you next week.